Tec Sounds presents EduTrends.
Welcome to this EduTrend podcast and webcast brought to you by the Institute for the Future of Education. My name is José Pepe Escamilla. I am Associate Director of the Institute for the Future of Education. And today we have a great invited is Steve Miller. He comes from the Singapore University of Management, where he's actually Professor Emeritus after several years. Steven, it's great to have you here. And I would like to start this conversation around AI in education with a short definition of what is AI and how are you predicting that it will impact the world of work for everyone in the world.
All right. Pepe, let's take that one at a time. First, let's give a practical and workable definition of what we mean by artificial intelligence. It's software systems that have abilities to do some amount of either reasoning, planning, learning, and by learning we mean able to use data to improve its performance. Also software that can help with communication with or between humans, as well as perception. And of course, software that can combine several of these different kinds of capabilities. To make this a little easier to understand on a practical basis, these kinds of core AI capabilities I just mentioned can be used to improve the way data is used to make predictions. It can be used to improve the way planning and optimization is done. It can be used to do automation of both administrative and information processes, as well as physical processes as well. So AI is not new. It goes back actually to the 1950s. There's been steady progress over all of the decades. So some people might ask, well, why am I hearing so much about it now? Actually, in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, there was also a lot of steady work in progress with AI. But there's been a convergence of a few things that means that AI has moved into a new wave in terms of demonstrable applications and impacts. That's the combination of all of the digital data around, decreases in the cost of computing, increasing ability to do the heavy mathematical computations and processing, especially through what are called the graphics processing units that were originally used in computer games. And what's happened is methods that have been around for decades, for example, to do what are called neural networks, deep learning kinds of methods, they're not new, but the convergence of the availability of the data, the availability of the hardware has just made it such that we've been able to demonstrate progress in machine learning, in language, and machine vision that has moved faster than people have expected over the last 5 years.
And what's the impact it will have on work?
Well, that's a broad question.
A very broad question,
okay. Yes. And let's come up a level before we get focused. There's a long history of new technology changing the way we work. So this is not a new theme. Even without artificial intelligence, mobile phones, cloud computing, sensors, just a continuation of information systems and making more use of computers has had profound impacts on everyday work, as well as people's everyday life as a consumer, as we all know from our mobile phones. All right. So AI enhances this, amplifies it, extends the reach of what software systems and machines, including embedding these software systems, can do. So we need to rethink our assumptions about well, what are the limits of what a machine can do? For example, everyone's used to using a spreadsheet. Years back, people used to use calculators. They don't use them as much anymore because they do it on their mobile phone or they do it in a spreadsheet. So these are examples of where tools have changed our everyday life. And now we're getting used to the fact that, we can have a chatbot. We can automatically get image recognition via a machine vision type program that can help categorize things. We can have, for example, Amazon or Spotify serve up recommendations based on these AI prediction algorithms. So we just get this embodied in almost all aspects of work. All right. So there's one issue on how do we train enough people who know how to create these systems. But the bigger need is how do we get people in every existing occupation, no matter what they do, to more responsibly and more capably work with support tools that are AI-enabled tools. And that's everybody, no matter what profession you're in. Let me give a good example in the home construction business or the building construction business. All right. So when you build, let's say, a 5-story building, it's always a very complicated environment. All right. And it's always been very hard to bring robots into the field to do that kind of construction. But I saw a video of a real live operation of a little robot. It looked like a tiny vacuum cleaner, right? It was small. It was on wheels. It had no arms. So you'd say, well, what can this robot do related to constructing a new building? So when you build a building, you have to know, where does the piping go? Where do the doors go? Where do the beams go? In other words, you need lines, literally chalk lines on the floor that correspond with the building plan. So people know where to put walls, where to put beams, where to put certain kinds of connectors, right? And it's obviously a difficult thing to take the actual blueprints or computer-generated blueprints and then to put the chalk on the floor so that the building crews know what to do. So in this case, the computer-aided planning sort of figures out the plan, and this little robot goes and puts the chalk lines on the floor. So that's everyday work. And actually, at least in the interviews related to this video, the building crew loved it because now I didn't get the electrical guys and the the water and the other kind of infrastructure people and the people doing the structural work. It was so much easier for them to all agree because they had a common unified set of chalk lines for which to sort of know what to do on the floor. So I use that as an everyday example of how the machine augments the way people work. It didn't displace anybody, but it just made it easier to get the technical specifications laid out on the floor, saved everybody a lot of time, and everything's done more accurately. Well, wouldn't we want to see more examples like that?
Great. So yesterday I attended a presentation of your book, Working with AI, Real Stories of Human-Machine Collaboration, and you made this distinction between automation, which is substituting a person, and augmentation that I think is very important. And you say in your book, companies and their employees will only be dealing with more and more technology, data, software, and digitization over time. So if we will be living in this world with more technology and augmented technology, people working with machines all the time, what are the skills that we need to develop in students, but also in the general population, to be able to get the best of technology and also to understand their shortcomings?
All right. So let me divide in two categories between people who are the creators of the AI methods and models and systems, and the people who have to use AI as part of their everyday work. The second category is a much, much, much bigger category of people and has many more people involved. All right. So I think the first thing is to get people to realize that AI is just a tool. It might have some amazing capabilities in some very specific application areas for which it's built. It might have seemingly superhuman capabilities, but it's only a tool. Tools have limits. So, for example, anytime we're doing something where an information system that includes an AI model is making a prediction, it's based on statistics and probability. It's not going to be right 100%. You're going to have what are called false positives. You say something is so when it's not. You're going to have false negatives. You say something is not so when it is, right? And that corresponds into predictions you might make for lifestyle things or for making loans or for business planning or resource allocation. So people have to get used to the fact that these tools can be remarkably useful. They can take in a lot of information we might not have at our disposal. They don't have some information that we do have at our disposal, something that changed yesterday or something that's going on today or some change in the context. And it's a recommendation. Probabilistically, it might be right 85% of the time or whatever the accuracy level is, but it's not right all of the time. And its ability to make the prediction depends on the thing that we're predicting being similar to all of the data used to train it. So they're making a prediction, and the prediction implies the future. But the irony is these prediction models assume that the new thing you're predicting is similar to what happened yesterday and what happened last week and what happened last month. So when you're in situations where the environment is relatively stable, the recommendations and predictions and plans made by these AI systems can be quite good. But when you're in situations where things are changing, where there's variability, where there's unexpected things happening, these predictions can be way off. And the machines have no idea of that. This is why we need the partnership between these AI-enabled machines and people, right? Some very clever observers have made the distinction between big data and thick data. And this is a very important distinction. So where we have many variables, many observations, many variables, many observations, and things are relatively stable. There can be some variation, but not dramatic changes. The ability to use these AI methods to build recommendation models, prediction models, planning models is very good, right? But often when some new event happens, some country does something and all of a sudden the geopolitics change, supply chains change, COVID comes out, all the time unexpected things happen. There's no history. All you have are little anecdotes. All you have are stories, right? So that's what people call thick data. It's dealing with changing situations through anecdotes and stories. Thick data turns out to be very good for dealing with changing and new and novel situations. Big data is something that works very well through these machine-based validated models, right? So the world is always changing. And that's why we need this combination of the people and the machines. and history and things where we already have a factual basis. There's over a 25-year history with AI-based tutors. Think of them as software-based coaches for mathematics lessons at elementary school and middle school levels, even high school levels. And there's been massive field studies to show that by giving students this personal coaching, like the system will put up, let's say you're a fourth grader, and at fourth grade, the teachers have already decided, the kinds of mathematical concepts that you should know and the kinds of problems that you should be able to do. And the issue is to get students to do that practice and to go, if you will, problem by problem, climbing a set of stairs of increasingly difficult problems. Well, in a class of 40 students, you take a test, and let's say you only get 70%, right? And there's 40 different students, and they all have different achievement levels. Very, very hard for the teacher to sit down with every student and give them personalized coaching about, given their existing level of capability and understanding, what's the next problem to do so that they can make the transition to knowing how to do the work. Well, if you could build this into a personalized tutor, it's wonderful. Now, mathematics is easy to evaluate. It's easy to judge. It's easy to know right or wrong. But the demonstration has been made that personal tutors and coaching can be very effective. So we've seen it for decades. It's becoming less expensive to do this. The ability for a school system to afford cloud computing-based solutions to do this is making it economically sensible. Now, what's going to happen is that same concept will gradually propagate to other types of disciplines, even writing essays or doing science kinds of problems or writing software code. So we'll get more coaching. Now, does this eliminate the role of the teacher? Not at all. Why? Learning has important social components. Motivation is very important for students. The teacher will play an important role on that. Each student sort of needs a lesson plan, if you will, and the teacher becomes the master planner for each student, either within a subject or cross subjects, where increasingly we'll get AI-enabled tutors who help the student work the details, right? So I think this has great promise for education. And I think one of the great challenges is how to make these capabilities accessible, not just to the well-funded schools, not just to the schools that are the top secondary schools or the top universities, but across the spectrum as well.
Exactly. I was thinking when you were saying that the school system or the universities implement some technology, it's when the professors can use it. But I was wondering if there's someone listening to this podcast and they say, well, my school is very far away from doing that. Is there something I can do to start to experiment with these tools for teaching learning, or is way out of my leagues?
No, that is such a good question, Pepe, because there's an analogy to what you just said to companies. There's some companies that already have hundreds, thousands of AI projects, and they have this internal capability to do the next one because they have this tremendous base of experience. But still, most companies in the world have not even started their first project. And the whole issue of, well, what do I do to do my very first thing when I have no background? So that applies to companies. And I think you asked the analogy of that question for an elementary school, a high school. Well, Well, one of the things maybe we can do through the Institute for the Future of Education is think through onboarding strategies for that kind of thing. A number of universities around the world are already internally doing projects. For example, people have to write computer code, not just in computer science classes, but in a wide variety of classes, because data science is something that nearly every discipline is picking up. I met at Tech 2 economics students, and they're doing the things that an economics student would do as an undergraduate student, but they're taking classes on Python coding to learn they're not trying to be professional software engineers. They're just writing code to do the kind of data organization and data analysis that an economics student needs to do. All right. So increasingly, there are tutors to give students feedback on, is this code written well? What can you do to make it better? Just like the example of the 4th grade or 7th grade math tutor. So that would be one example. Students are definitely starting to use large language models, which are a new development, a very recent development in artificial intelligence, to help with writing essays. All right. Scientific investigators are using planning tools, optimization tools, learning tools, all combined into unified systems to do scientific discovery and investigation. There's the famous recent example of the protein folding problem. How do you predict how a protein will fold in 3 dimensions? This turns out to be very, very important for a number of biological issues. It's not the only thing you need to know when you're trying to invent a drug or vaccine, but it's a very important step. And it's demonstrated that AI tools have been able to do better protein folding predictions than have been achievable in the last 50 years. So if the scientists are using these tools to extend the frontiers of science, obviously we're going to start seeing these things as younger students just taking regular university courses do their homework sets. So I think that's a new frontier. Your question is, how do we get someone to start on this if they have limited experience? I don't have an answer to that, but you identified a type of problem and challenge that I think would be a great thing for Institute of Future of Education to help pull resources together on and serve as a resource, because I think a lot of standalone education institutions would be fantastically interested.
Thank you. Yes, you're right. I think it's not an easy question, and I was thinking about something we talked yesterday. So students are always in advance to professors technology-wise, no? So they start to use their tools before, etc. And I remember maybe 20 years ago when I was training faculty, I told them, well, if you don't know how to light up your projector, you can ask always your students, they will find out how to, no? So you can make them your accomplice in the things that you're doing. So maybe there's also an opportunity there for faculty to, or for professors to try to look at their students and take advantage of this knowledge that they have and their willingness to use those tools. No? So you mentioned the use of tools to write essays. No? So there's also this question comes with as part of the answer to that question that I'm saying, but also as a question that we have to be prepared for maybe ethical things, but also changing the way we teach or the things we teach. No? So if there are these programs that can generate an essay based on a question. No? So you say whatever philosopher and on Christianity and et cetera, did this, what he said about that, and the system can take information from a lot of sources that has ingested and produce, some say that it's not that bad. Is the system doesn't understand what the essay says because it's statistically based, but it sounds that it's okay. And you made the prediction that in a university as Tec de Monterrey that has 65,000 undergrad students, there are at least some students that are already doing that.
Right,
no?
Has to be.
That are really doing that. So how should we be dealing with that? I would say ethically, well, those students are maybe delivering work that is not theirs, but also how to deal as AI as a new tool for that will be part of their lives, and teach them how to use that tool. Like I told you, when I was entering the university, I was not allowed to use the calculator at that time, a scientific calculator, because they thought you will become dumb because you don't use you don't do the math manually, no? So is AI the new calculator in education also?
Right. So there's two parts to your comments, Pepe. The very first part, where you gave the example of maybe the students could teach the professor how to use these tools. And then the second point about what happens to a university or a high school, for example, as students start using these tools. Let me take the first part. And you brought out the point that in the classroom, there can be two-way mentoring. You think of the classroom teacher as being the more experienced one than the students in whatever the subject matter that's being taught. But you made the astute observation that often, almost always, the students are ahead of the teacher in terms of what are apps available on my mobile phone that can serve as tutors or guides, or what are things that I can find on the internet. And I think that's a great idea. It's bringing crowdsourcing, if you will, in a certain focused way, that the teacher working with the crowd of their students to have the students help identify what are some new tools that we can bring into our classroom. All right. Now, let me come back to your second point. Given that these tools are increasingly available to do homework sets in almost any discipline you can think of, right? The tools aren't perfect. The responses, sometimes they're correct, sometimes they're incorrect, sometimes they're good starting points, sometimes less so, all right? But nonetheless, one way that I think we can summarize the educational situation is within a semester, right? Different schools have different length of semester, but let's just say within a semester, most of the time is spent on generating content or getting the answers to things, and there's relatively little time for generating many different alternatives and for evaluating the different alternatives. It just takes the student too long to learn how to do the initial set of exercises. So you only get one or two iterations, and you don't get a lot of evaluation time. So what happens if we transition to a world where in just 10 or 20% of the clock time of the entire course, I can generate hundreds of alternatives? But I don't know which are good. I don't know which are bad. I don't know which are based on true information. I might get all these computer-aided designs for how to build a building or a structure, and some of them might be very fanciful and very creative. I don't know which ones are safe and won't fall down. So increasingly, how does the student, even the younger age student, I don't mean maybe first grade, but maybe once we get to middle school and beyond, how does one evaluate the quality of a alternative answer, one answer out of many, where these computer tools can help me generate hundreds of options or hundreds of alternatives, right? Or sometimes it gives me the answer, but how do I validate that the answer is true? Because the assumptions under which the model was trained might be different than the assumptions under which I'm considering this problem. So these are fairly sophisticated skills, but we need to start moving them into younger and younger students. It's not that these skills of evaluation and critiquing are new, right? But you think of them with seasoned professionals, and frankly speaking, you just don't get that much time to do that within the semester in a particular subject. So I don't see the role of teachers going away, but the way time is spent within a semester on a given topic matter may in fact change, where I can more easily generate alternatives across many, many students. Each student can do this, but how do I then build a student's judgment? And then it comes to the very fundamental issue of, what am I assessing the student on? Before, I was assessing them on, can they even generate an essay? And is it sort of half decent to read? Well, if that can be done on the first day of class with the assistance of a super tool, where do I go the rest of the semester? Where am I taking it, right? So it's in the quality of the essay, the comparative essay, going to the second and third, fourth and fifth iteration on the essay. So I think this will be a learning journey for everybody, for the faculty as well as the students.
Thank you very much, Steve. It has been a wonderful conversation, and I believe that this is the time for AI to deliver, not only in the workplace, but in education, and we will see more and more tools. And I also believe that they will be augmenting our work, and we have to learn to work with them and to understand what are the things that they can do, their shortcomings, and understanding where they come from, who created them, how they created them, so we will be more able to take advantage of the tools.
Yeah, I think rather than, AI, we see it as a threat to the race, let's think of AI as amplified intelligence. And where the intelligence is coming from, we as people, with the amazing set of biologically evolved capabilities that we have, right? And they really are amazing, as well as, remember, who created these tools? They all come from human minds. All these tools come from human minds. These are our tools, just like all the other tools that we surround ourselves with. And if humans can work together with these tools to amplify intelligence, maybe there's a hope to do a better job in preparing for the next COVID-like plague that sweeps the world. Maybe there's a more capability to deal with getting water and food to people all over the world, for example, or to dealing with climate change. So I don't want to be overly idealistic. These hard problems aren't going to go away easily because a lot of them are not simply technological. They're people, they're institutional, they're political. But as daunting as these challenges sound, if we can get our young people and our other segments of the population to figure out how to amplify our capabilities, but in positive, constructive, ethical ways, there's hope. And as long as we have a sense of hope, Pepe, we'll be okay.
That's great. Thanks. With this sense of hope, we are going to finish this conversation with you, Steve. Thanks a lot for your generosity and for these interesting ideas that you are being sharing. I'm sure our audience will enjoy also them. And I hope to have you soon on this studio.
Thank you, Pepe. It's been a delight.
For more information, visit observatory.tech.mx/EduTrends podcast and ife.tech.mx. A special thanks to Tecnológico de Monterrey, the Institute for the Future of Education, and the Tec Sounds team. Tec Sounds producer, Miguel Mejia. EduTrends producers, Esteban Venegas and Christian Igosa. Stay tuned and play Tec Sounds in your favorite podcast app for other great shows and content.